Jake had been part of the peacekeeping crew sent to the alien planet for 2 weeks. He had always dreamed of seeing other worlds, but nothing prepared him for the vast, shining city that sprawled before him. The streets were made of smooth, shimmering material that seemed to glow under the bright alien sun. The air was crisp, different from Earth's, and filled with the scent of unfamiliar flowers. He had seen it all except for the royal palace. The palace stood at the heart of the city, a towering structure of silver and glass. It was so massive that Jake had to crane his neck just to take in its full size. His mission was simple: to help with the diplomatic relations between Earth and this alien kingdom. Jake was just a small part of the team, meant to assist with minor tasks and learn from the experience. He had been told to stay with his team and avoid wandering. Jake couldn't resist. He had heard the rumors about the royal palace and the beauty of the alien princess. People said she was not only a skilled ruler, but also stunningly beautiful, something Jake couldn't help but imagine. He figured he could sneak a peek, just for a few minutes, so one quiet morning, when the team was busy with meetings, Jake decided to explore. He found his way to the palace, careful to avoid the guards. The palace was even more breathtaking. Up close, he wandered through grand halls, taking in the alien artwork on the walls and the strange sculptures. It felt like he had stepped into another world, something straight out of a dream. As he made his way deeper into the palace, he found himself walking down a long hallway. The floor was made of soft, silver material that seemed to absorb sound. There were no windows here, just grand doors that led to different rooms. Jake paused, his curiosity getting the better of him. One door was slightly ajar. He leaned in, peering inside. It was a dressing room, a place filled with mirrors and strange, delicate fabrics. Jake should have turned around right then. He should have walked away, but his feet didn't listen. He pushed the door open, hoping to get a quick look at the room and leave before anyone noticed. But then he froze. Inside the room stood the alien princess, Yara, surrounded by her attendants. She was in the middle of changing, her back turned as she held up a shimmering fabric. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He had heard about her beauty, but seeing her in person, he was speechless. Her skin was pale, glowing faintly, with soft features that made her seem like she had stepped out of a dream. Her long hair cascaded down her back like dark silk, and her eyes were a stunning shade of violet. He didn't know what to do. "Oh, my God," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Yara whipped around, her eyes locking onto Jake's. For a moment, there was silence, then chaos. "You," she cried, her voice sharp. Her attendants gasped and quickly backed away, clearly alarmed by his presence. Jake's face turned beet red. "I'm so sorry," Jake blurted, his hands raised in surrender. "I didn't mean to, I wasn't thinking." Yara didn't seem furious, but there was something in her gaze that made Jake feel very small. Her violet eyes studied him for a long moment, and then, to his surprise, she didn't yell. Instead, she raised a hand, signaling her attendants to step back. "I'll handle this," she said calmly, her voice not angry but cold. "Leave us." The attendants hesitated but quickly obeyed, leaving the room in a rush. Jake stood there, frozen. What did he do now? He was stuck, alone in a dressing room with an alien princess who was both beautiful and dangerous. "Are you going to stand there all day, human?" Yara's voice cut through his thoughts. I'm sorry," Jake muttered again, his face still red. "I didn't mean to intrude. I thought you'd take a peek at the royal dressing room, didn't you?" There was no anger in her tone, only a sense of amusement. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. He was in deep trouble now. "I didn't mean to offend you," he stammered. "I was just curious." "I didn't curious," Yara repeated, her gaze narrowing slightly. "And what did you think you'd find? Secrets, beauty, or perhaps something more?" Jake swallowed, his mind racing. I mean, no. I wasn't trying to find anything. I just, got lost." He tried to backpedal, but it only made things worse. Wire seemed to study him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "You humans are always so bold, so... Unafraid," she said slowly, stepping closer to him. You see something you want and simply take it, don't you? I didn't mean any harm. Jake quickly added. She stared at him for another long moment, then sighed. You've made a foolish mistake, human. But perhaps? Yara trailed off, her violet eyes softening ever so slightly. Perhaps it's one worth considering. Jake wasn't sure if she was threatening him, or if she actually found his presence intriguing. Either way, he was too stunned to say anything. More. You'll stay here, she said, turning away from him. But don't get any ideas. I'll have your people informed of your mistake. Jake opened his mouth to protest, but closed it again. There was nothing he could say to get out of this. He was stuck here. He took a deep breath, knowing that this was just the beginning of his trouble. The alien princess was not what he expected, but he had no idea just how much his accidental intrusion would change everything. Jake had expected to be locked up in some royal prison for his mistake, but instead Princess Yara had surprised him. She didn't throw him into a cell or call for punishment. Instead, she insisted he stay in the palace under her watch, assigning him menial tasks that seemed harmless enough. At first, Jake thought it was just a way for Yara to keep an eye on him, but over time, things began to change. His first task was simple, cleaning up after one of her royal meetings. He wasn't sure why he was asked to do it, but he didn't argue. The palace was massive, filled with soft, shiny floors and endless hallways. Every room he stepped into was more magnificent than the last. He couldn't help but feel like a visitor in another world. Yara's royal quarters were next on his list. He hesitated at the door, but knocked anyway. Enter, came her voice from the inside. Jake stepped into the room, carrying a tray of food for her, something she had asked for earlier in the day. Yara was sitting by the window, her long hair falling down her back in soft waves. She glanced up at him as he walked in, but didn't seem surprised to see him again. Jake, is it? She asked, her tone curious but calm. Yes, Your Highness, he replied, placing the tray on the table next to her. He couldn't help but feel a little nervous. It was something about her that made him feel both at ease and out of place at the same time. Sit, she said, motioning to the chair opposite her. Jake blinked. I'm not sure I should. Do you think I care about that? She replied with a smile, one that was both warm and sharp. Sit. Jake obeyed, trying to ignore the fact that this was the princess's personal space. He sat down, his legs stiff, not sure where to look. For the next few moments, there was an awkward silence between them. Yara picked up a piece of fruit from the tray and slowly bit into it. She watched him with those piercing violet eyes as though she was studying him. Jake tried to relax, but found himself unsure of how to behave around her. So, she began after a long pause. Tell me about your world. Jake was taken aback. My world? He repeated. Yes, Earth. I know little of it, except that your people are different, she said thoughtfully. Jake found himself talking. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, or the way she didn't treat him like just another servant. He told her about his life back on Earth, about his family, his love for adventure, and his desire to explore the galaxy. He spoke about Earth's cities, technology, and culture, and surprisingly, Yara listened intently. She asked questions, sometimes deep ones, about human nature and emotions. It was clear she was trying to understand humans more than simply viewing them as another species. Your people, you care for each other, don't you? She asked quietly. Despite everything.
Yes.
Jake nodded slowly. Yeah, we do. Sometimes we make mistakes, but we always try to help each other. That's how we survive, how we grow. Yara's expression softened for a moment, as though she were reflecting on his words. She set the fruit aside and leaned back in her chair, her gaze now distant. Jake didn't speak, but he could feel the weight of her thoughts. You know, she said after a pause, I often wonder what it would be like to just ... live among your people. To not be a princess, not a ruler, just ... a person. Jake felt a pang of sympathy. It was something he hadn't expected to hear from someone like her. A princess, someone who ruled an entire kingdom, was dreaming of a life without such heavy responsibilities. It sounds like you're trapped in a cage, he said softly. Yara's eyes flicked to him, her lips pressing together in a thin line. Perhaps, she admitted, it is a cage of my own making. But it is also one I cannot escape from. I am bound by my title, my people, my family. Jake didn't know how to respond to that. He had never imagined that a princess could feel. Like a prisoner in her own palace. The weight of leadership, the constant pressure to be perfect, to make the right decisions, it all sounded like a life he wouldn't wish on anyone. But there was something else in her words that struck him. She had opened up to him in a way he hadn't expected. They were two different species from different worlds, yet she was showing him a vulnerability that was almost ... human. The conversation drifted. Before Jake knew it, hours had passed. They spoke about everything from music to their favorite foods. Yara even laughed at some of Jake's silly stories about life on Earth. It was a strange moment, one where the world outside the palace didn't matter. It was just the two of them. Sharing a quiet evening together, Yara didn't demand anything from him. She didn't treat him like a subject, like someone beneath her. She treated him like an equal. When Jake stood to leave, he felt a strange weight in his chest. He didn't want to leave, not just because he was afraid of making another mistake, but because the connection he had made with Yara felt real. He realized that something had shifted between them, something unexpected. Maybe they were both more alike than they had ever thought. Jake, Yara said, just as he reached the door. He turned to face her. Thank you for being different. Jake smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. You're welcome, Your Highness, he said, bowing slightly. I'll see you tomorrow, Yara nodded. I look forward to it. As Jake left her quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change, not just for him, but for the galaxy itself. Jake spent the next few days in the palace, helping Yara with her royal duties. They spent hours together, working through complicated paperwork and diplomatic meetings. Although their relationship was still new, there was a growing sense of trust between them. Yara didn't treat him like just another earthling, and Jake began to see her as more than just a powerful ruler. She was intelligent, curious, and surprisingly kind. However, their time together wasn't without its challenges. Whispers started to spread through the palace halls. The courtiers, the royal advisors, and even the servants began to notice Jake's increasing presence around the princess. Many were suspicious, some jealous, and others worried about what it all meant for their kingdom's future. You have to stop spending so much time with him, Zarek, one of Yara's most trusted advisors, warned her one evening after Jake had left her quarters. He was a tall, serious man with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude. People are starting to talk. Yara looked up from the document she had been reading. What are they saying? She asked, her tone calm. But there was an edge, too. Her voice that made Zarek pause. They say it's inappropriate, Zarek said, his voice lower now. That you're being too... lenient with the human. Lenient, Yara raised an eyebrow. Is that what they're calling it? Zarek didn't respond right away. Instead, he glanced at the door where Jake had exited only moments before. You're the ruler here, Yara. You can't allow the rules to be broken just because you find his presence. Amusing, Yara sighed. I'm not breaking any rules, Zarek. I'm simply learning more about him. About humans. Why is that so? Wrong. Zarek's expression softened, but his concern was still clear. Because you are the princess. You are expected to lead your people with strength, with clarity, not to indulge in ... curiosity. He shook his head. I understand you want to understand them, but mixing with them could cause problems. People won't accept it. Yara sat back in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk. She knew Zarek was right in some ways. How the kingdom had always been ruled by tradition, and her people respected strength. They respected order. What they didn't understand was the pull she felt when she was with Jake. He wasn't like the others, and he saw her for who she was. It's not just as the princess, but he's not like the others, Yara murmured to herself. Zarek's expression hardened. It doesn't matter. If this goes on, it will create divisions in the court, and it could lead to unrest in the kingdom. There are those who do not want humans in our space, let alone one so close to you. Yara leaned forward, her gaze steady. I know what I'm doing. Zarek gave her one last look, then turned and walked out of the room, leaving Yara alone with her thoughts. She wasn't sure what was more concerning, the mounting tension within her court or the growing connection she felt with Jake. It was something she hadn't expected, something she didn't know how to control. Jake, meanwhile, had no idea how much trouble he was causing. He had simply been doing his job, trying to help Yara and understand the alien culture. He had never imagined that his presence would stir up so much talk. One evening, after a particularly long day of discussions and meetings, Jake found himself in the royal gardens. The air was cool, and the stars above shimmered like diamonds. It was quiet here, peaceful, just the kind of place to clear his mind. He hadn't expected to find Yara there, standing alone by the fountain. Her back was to him, and she appeared, lost in thought. Her long hair flowed behind her like a silken curtain, and her silhouette was bathed in the soft glow of the garden lights. She looked so distant, so different from the confident ruler he saw during the day. Your Highness? Jake called softly, hesitant. Yara turned to face him, her violet eyes locking onto his. Jake, she said with a small smile, I didn't expect you to find me here. He stepped closer, unsure of what to say. I just wanted some air. I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting, she said, her voice softer than usual. I just needed some time alone. Jake stood next to her, both of them staring at the fountain. Sound of water trickling into the pool was the only sound between them. Zarek was just here, Yara said, after a long silence, her tone casual but carrying an underlying tension. Is he upset with me? Jake asked, feeling guilty even though he didn't fully understand why. Yara didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out across the garden, her face shadowed by the night. He's worried. Everyone is. They think my attention is being divided, that I'm distracted. Jake's heart sank. You don't have to explain yourself to me. I didn't mean to cause problems. Yara finally turned her head to look at him, and for the first time, there was a hint of vulnerability in her gaze. I didn't ask for this, for you to be here, but now that you are. I'm not sure what to do, Jake swallowed. He wasn't sure what to say either. He had no idea how to fix this, how to make everything better. All he wanted was to help Yara to do what was right. But it was clear that things were becoming more complicated than either of them could have imagined. Yara sighed, stepping closer to him. You've made a difference, Jake, but I can't ignore what's happening. My kingdom is at stake. Jake reached out, placing a hand gently on her arm. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly. I'll help you, whatever you need. Yara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Then slowly she nodded. Double quotes, thank you, she whispered. But this is going to get harder before it gets easier. Jake wasn't sure what to expect next. But one thing was certain. Things were about to change in ways he couldn't control. And somehow he knew he wouldn't be able to walk away from Yara, even if he tried. The tension in the royal palace continued to rise, despite Jake's best efforts to remain in the background. The whispers from the courtiers and advisors had not quieted. And every time Jake entered the room, he could feel the eyes of the palace staff on him. He was becoming more and more aware of the political game Yara had to play every day. Her kingdom was full of complex alliances, rivalries, and old traditions. Jake was a foreign element that no one had expected. Yara, too, seemed to feel the pressure. Though she had been kind to him and had trusted him with more responsibilities, the weight of her position was always there, lingering between them. She would often look at him, her expression distant, as though she were considering something she didn't want to share. One night, after a particularly exhausting meeting with her council, Yara pulled Jake aside. She looked tired, her normally sharp eyes clouded with worry. Jake, something is happening, she said in a low voice. There's a plot against me. Jake frowned. A plot? What do you mean? Yara glanced around, ensuring no one was nearby to overhear. There are those in the court who want to weaken my rule. They believe that I've become too distracted by you. They think I'm too weak to lead. And now, there's more. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Who's behind this? I don't know yet, she replied, her voice tight. But I've learned that a group of rebels has been secretly gathering. They're making plans to destabilize my reign. They don't want peace with the humans. They believe we should be preparing for war instead." Jake's mind raced. He had never imagined that his presence here could spark such unrest. He had thought that helping Yara would bring them closer, not cause such a dangerous conflict. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, determined to help in any way he could. Yara's gaze softened, but her expression was still one of concern. "I need you to keep your distance, Jake. I don't want you to be involved in this. If these rebels find out how close we've become, they will use it against me. And you'll be in danger." Jake shook his head. "No, I'm not leaving. If there's a threat to you, I'm staying." Yara opened her mouth to argue, but then closed it. She could see the resolve in his eyes, the same determination that had made him so different from the others. She sighed. "Fine, but promise me this. If anything happens, you will leave. You will get to safety." Jake nodded. "I promise." The days that followed were filled with a sense of unease. Yara continued to carry out her royal duties, but Jake could see the strain it was putting on her. Every decision she made seemed to be scrutinized by those around her. Every word she spoke was weighed and measured by her advisors. She was no longer the confident, poised leader she had been. Instead, she was trapped in a web of political games and betrayal. Then, one evening, everything changed. Jake had been sent to deliver a message to one of Yara's allies in the council, a trusted lord who had always supported her. He made his way to the lord's private chambers, but when he arrived, he was met with an unexpected sight. The door to the chambers was slightly ajar, and through the crack, Jake could hear muffled voices. He paused, hesitating. Something didn't feel right. Curiosity got the better of him, and he slowly pushed the door open, just enough to peer inside. To his shock, he saw the Lord speaking with a group of strangers, their faces hidden behind dark hoods. One of the strangers was holding a map, pointing at various locations across the kingdom. The others were nodding, murmuring in agreement. Jake's heart raced as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. These weren't just political advisors. These were rebels. He could tell by the way they spoke about the kingdom's weaknesses, about how they planned to attack certain areas to create chaos. The Lord was involved in this plot. Jake's mind spun. He couldn't stay here. He had to warn Yara. But just as he turned to leave, his foot knocked against a small vase on the ground. Ow. It fell to the floor with a loud crash. The rebels turned toward him, their eyes narrowing. Jake didn't hesitate. He ran. Yara was in the palace gardens when Jake found her, breathless and panicked. "Yara, you need to listen to me. There's a plot against you. The Lord, you trusted him, but he's involved with the rebels." Yara's eyes widened with shock. "What? How do you know this?" "I saw them," Jake said, his voice urgent. "I saw him meeting with them. They're planning an attack. They want to destabilize your reign, create chaos so they can take control." Yara's face hardened as she took in the news. "I knew something was wrong," she muttered. "But I never imagined it would go this far." Jake grabbed her arm gently. "What do we do? How do we stop them?" Yara thought for a moment, then turned to him. "We need to act fast. I have to call for an emergency council meeting. If I don't confront them now, it will be too late." Jake nodded. "I'm with you, whatever it takes." They quickly made their way to the council chamber, where Yara called for an immediate meeting. When the doors opened, the members of her council were all present, including the traitor lord. Yara stood tall before them, her eyes scanning the room. "You all think you can betray me without consequence?" Yara's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it that made the room go silent. "I know what you've been planning. The rebellion, the attacks, all of it. And it ends now." The traitor lord tried to speak, but Yara cut him off. "You're done. You and your associates will be held accountable for your actions. The kingdom will not fall." The events of the past few days weighed heavily on Yara. The traitors had been exposed, and the rebellion had been crushed, but the aftermath left her feeling drained. It had been a close call, and there was still much work to do. Her kingdom had been shaken, and the court was in chaos. But there was one thing that remained clear in her mind. She couldn't face this alone anymore. Jake had stood by her side through it all. He hadn't run when things got dangerous. He had fought alongside her, helping her in ways that she had never expected. His bravery and loyalty had changed the course of everything. Yara couldn't ignore what that meant, and neither could her people. Jake had proven that humans could be more than just outsiders, more than just allies in name. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that humans, like Jake, had the potential to change the galaxy. Yara sat in her private chambers, the flickering light from a distant star casting long shadows across the walls. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, but one thing kept coming back to her: the possibility of a new future where Earth and her kingdom could stand together. A knock on the door broke her train of thought. "Enter," she called, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Jake stepped into the room, looking as calm as ever. His presence was a comfort to her, something she hadn't expected when they first met. He was no longer just the human who had accidentally stumbled into her life. He was someone she had come to rely on. "You asked to see me, Your Highness?" Jake asked, his tone respectful but friendly. Yara nodded. "Yes, Jake. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, about what's next." Jake took a seat across from her, watching her closely. "What do you mean?" "Thinking about how much things have changed since you arrived," she said quietly. "And I'm wondering if you've considered what role humans will play in the future of my kingdom, in the future of the galaxy." Jake blinked, surprised by the question. "I hadn't thought about it much," he admitted. "I've been just trying to help you and your people. Stay out of trouble," Yara smiled faintly. "You've done more than that. You've shown me that humans are capable of more than I ever imagined. I thought of your species as primitive, too young to understand the complexities of the galaxy. But I've seen that's not true. You're capable of change, of creating alliances, and that's why I want to propose something to you." Jake leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to form an alliance," Yara said, her voice steady with purpose, not just a political one. "A true partnership between Earth and my kingdom. Together, we could stand against those who would seek to destroy us. We could change the balance of power in this galaxy." Jake felt his heart race. This was more than he had ever hoped for. It was a proposal that would reshape everything. A true partnership between Earth and the alien kingdom, something no one had ever considered before. "You want humans to join you, to help you protect your kingdom?" he asked, still processing the enormity of the offer. Yara nodded. "We've already faced threats from within my own court, and there are dangers outside our borders. But I don't want a war. I don't want to fight unless we have to. I want to build something stronger, something that lasts. And I believe the humans, under your leadership, can help make that happen." Jake didn't know what to say. He had always thought of Earth as just another planet in the vast galaxy, nothing special. But now, Yara was offering something he hadn't expected, the chance to make a real difference, to build something that could change the future for everyone. "We can't just jump into this," Jake said after a moment, his voice thoughtful. "We need to be sure. We need to be prepared." Yara smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I know, but I'm asking you to help me make it happen. Help me unite our worlds, together." Jake took a deep breath. This was it, the opportunity he had been waiting for. "Okay, let's do it." The next few weeks were filled with intense discussions and planning. Jake and Yara worked together to draft the terms of their alliance, with a team of advisors from both Earth and Yara's kingdom. There were challenges, of course. The Royal Council still didn't trust Jake. And there were members of Yara's court who were openly hostile to the idea of aligning with humans. But Yara was determined. She had seen the potential in Jake and his people, and she wasn't going to let anyone stand in the way. The most difficult part was convincing the humans. Earth's leaders had been hesitant to get involved with the alien kingdom at first, but with the growing threat of the rebels and the promise of a stronger alliance, they began to see the value in Yara's proposal. The two sides negotiated, discussed, and compromised until they finally reached an agreement. When the alliance was officially signed, it was a moment of victory. Not just for Yara and Jake, but for both Earth and the alien kingdom. Together they had built something stronger than either side could have done alone. And though it wasn't a perfect solution, it was a beginning. A new beginning for both worlds As the days passed, Yara and Jake stood together on the balcony of the palace, overlooking the city below. The sky was dark, dotted with stars, and a cool breeze carried the scent of the alien flowers that grew throughout the palace grounds. Jake turned to Yara, a small smile on his face. "So, what's next?" Yara looked out at the horizon, her expression determined. "We prepare. We train. We unite our people. The future won't be easy, but it's one we will face together." Jake nodded. Together. The galaxy had changed, and so had they. The path ahead was uncertain, but with their alliance, they were ready for whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, Jake believed in the possibility of a future where both worlds could thrive. The days that followed the signing of the alliance were filled with both hope and uncertainty. The tension in the palace had not fully disappeared, but for the first time in a long while, there was a sense of unity. Yara and Jake had worked tirelessly to strengthen their alliance, and though it wasn't perfect, it was a step in the right direction. Both sides had agreed to share knowledge, resources, and, most importantly, protect each other from any external threats. But even as they made progress, there was a constant reminder of the challenges they faced. Not everyone was happy with the alliance. There were still rebels on the fringes, determined to tear down what Yara and Jake had worked so hard to build, and the political factions within the kingdom remained divided, with many feeling that the human presence was a threat to their way of life. One afternoon, as Jake and Yara were going over the final details of a joint training exercise between the human forces and the royal guard, there was a sudden knock on the door. Yara looked up, her brow furrowed. She had been expecting a visit from her military commanders, but this was different. "Enter," she called, her voice steady but filled with caution. The door opened, and a young guard stepped inside, his face pale. "Your Highness, there's a situation," he said quickly. "We've received word of an attack. The rebels... they've struck a nearby city." Yara's expression hardened. She stood up immediately, her hands clenched at her sides. "How bad is it?" she asked, her voice calm but with a sharp edge. "They've already taken control of the eastern sector. The civilian forces are fighting back, but they're outnumbered. We don't know how much longer they can hold," the guard replied. Jake's heart sank. He had known that this was a possibility, but hearing it confirmed made the danger all too real. The alliance was still fragile, and the rebels were not going to give up easily. Yara turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. "We need to act quickly," she said. "I can't let them tear everything we've built apart." Jake nodded. "I'm with you." "What do you need me to do?" Yara's gaze softened for a moment. "I need you to stay with the human forces, lead them into the city. Help them secure it before the rebels can do more damage. I'll rally the Royal Guard and meet you there." Jake didn't hesitate. "Understood, I'll get to the front lines." The journey to the eastern sector was tense. Jake rode alongside a small group of human soldiers, their faces grim as they prepared for battle. The city was just beyond the horizon, and with each passing minute, the sounds of distant explosions grew louder. It was a constant reminder that the war for the future of the galaxy was just beginning. When they finally arrived at the outskirts of the city, the sight was worse than Jake had expected. Buildings were burning and smoke filled the air. Streets were filled with the sounds of gunfire and shouting. The rebel forces had clearly taken control, and the civilians were caught in the middle. Jake quickly organized his troops, sending them into strategic positions. The plan was simple: clear the streets, push the rebels back, and hold the city until reinforcements arrived. But as the fighting grew more intense, Jake realized just how dire the situation was. Well prepared, and their numbers were overwhelming. The human forces were outmatch. It wasn't long before Jake was called to the front lines. He rushed forward, his heart racing as he saw the rebel leader, a tall, imposing figure standing at the center of the battlefield. The man's eyes locked onto Jake's as he advanced, his face twisted in anger. "You're the human who thinks he can stop us?" the rebel leader shouted. "You have no place here." Jake didn't flinch. I'm here to stop you, he replied firmly. This war ends today, the rebel leader sneered. You think you can change anything? You're just a pawn in their game? This is our galaxy, not yours. Before Jake could respond, the rebel leader raised his weapon, signaling his troops. To advance, a brutal firefight broke out, the sound of gunfire echoing in the air. Jake and his soldiers fought back, using everything they had to hold the line. It was chaotic, brutal, and exhausting, but they couldn't afford to lose. Back at the palace, Yara had rallied her royal guard and was preparing to make her move. She couldn't let Jake fight this battle alone. The rebels had made their move, and it was time for her to show them what her kingdom was capable of. As Yara and her forces made their way toward the city, she thought about everything that had led them to this point. The alliance with the humans, the challenges, the risks they had all been leading up to this moment. The decision she had made to trust Jake, to trust Earth, was not just about her kingdom's survival. It was about something greater, something that could change the entire galaxy. She arrived at the outskirts of the city just as Jake's forces were pushing back the rebels. The sound of gunfire and explosions still echoed in the distance. Yara's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her focus. We move in now, she ordered, her voice steady. We take back the city. With that, the royal guard charged forward, their weapons raised, ready to fight for their kingdom and their future. The battle raged on for hours, but in the end, Jake's forces, supported by Yara's royal guard, managed to reclaim the city. The rebel leader was captured, and the remaining rebels were pushed into the wilderness. It was a hard-fought victory. It was a victory nonetheless. As the dust settled and the wounded were tended to, Jake and Yara stood together in the heart of the city. It had been a long, exhausting day, but they had succeeded. Together, Yara turned to Jake, her eyes filled with gratitude. You did it, she said softly. We did it. Jake smiled, though he was weary. We're not done yet, but we're closer than we were before. Yara nodded. This was just the beginning. There's still much to do. But together, we can face anything. Jake looked out at the city, feeling a sense of pride. This battle was over, but the war for the future was just beginning. And with Yara by his side, he knew they could overcome whatever challenges lay ahead.